We move our conversation now to tobacco control. And we want to talk about the effect of tobacco control and how more and more people can actually get to be aware of effects of tobacco control. Those who would like to kick the habit, how can they get support out of this? How can they reach out to people who can help them get support out of this? And this is what we'll be discussing. Rachel Kitonyo is a senior tobacco control advisor at the Tobacco Control Data Initiative program at the Development Gateway. And she's here alongside Dorcas Kiptui, who is the head of the Division of Tobacco Control Department of the Department of Non-Communicable Diseases at the Ministry of Health of the Republic of Kenya in East Africa and Africa. A long one. Let me repeat. Dorcas Kiptui is the head at the Division of Tobacco Control in the Department of Non-Communicable Diseases at the Ministry of Health in the Republic of Kenya. Good morning, ladies.
Good morning.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning. Karibuni sana. Rachel, you've been here before, so you're feeling comfortable.
Very
right?
good.
I hope when you were coming in with Dorcas, you told her, these are good people. It's a nice environment, cool air. Have a conversation. And that's why Dorcas is looking very comfortable. Karibu sana, Dorcas.
Asante, good morning.
Good morning. When you have Serikali in the room, what we do is we welcome the Serikali with the day's proverb. City.
Yes. Our proverbs for the whole of this week, which ends on Friday, are from the country of Burkina Faso. An axe does not cut the tree on its own.
An axe does not cut a tree on its own.
No, it doesn't.
Aha, Dorcas, you get it. What's your interpretation of this proverb?
Somebody has to move. First, you have to make once the axe has been made, somebody has to move it to cut the tree. And I think it's very applicable to the reason why we are here this morning.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Because
sometimes even one person cannot cut a tree by themselves. Sometimes you need 2 people or 3. That's why we collaborate with organizations such as the Development Gateway.
All right. Rachel, what's your interpretation?
Well, first, I think CT should not have picked that one because in tobacco control, we don't particularly like cutting of trees.
Oh, no.
Because of deforestation caused by cutting trees for tobacco use. But I agree with Dorcas that it talks about cooperation and collaboration to achieve an end. So in that sense, it is true that an axe doesn't cut on its own.
You don't work alone.
Yes.
Kidole kimoja.
Chawa.
Akivunji.
Tuvunji chawa tunaua.
Talk to the wahenga. They thought different. Now we're here today because we want to talk about now tobacco control. And I just want to come back to you, Dorcas. We know that there's a Tobacco Control Act in this country. For people who have just visited this country from the moon, and there are those who landed last week from Mars and they don't know about this, please tell them about it. What's this law and what's it all about?
Allow me to just go back a bit and say why tobacco control. Tobacco production and consumption has very devastating effects, not only on the health of human beings, but also on the environment, on the society, and also on the economy of a country and household and an individual. So it is because of this that countries came up together to agree under the auspices of World Health Organization to develop a global framework to address the global tobacco epidemic. And why countries have to come together is because tobacco control involves a lot of complex issues at national level, at individual level, community level, and also cross-border. That is why you need international cooperation to do this. It also touches on very many issues, media, advertising. I am a health professional, but I've learned a lot of legal issues, entertainment issues, let me say media and communication issues, agriculture, economics, because of this multifaceted issue. So it is for this reason that Kenya ratified the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, which is a global treaty. And under Chapter 2 of our Constitution, if the country ratifies any global treaty, it becomes part of our law. And to implement an international treaty, a country has to domesticate it through its own national law. So we have the Tobacco Control Act of Kenya, which was passed in 2007. It's a very comprehensive act and also is based on the provisions of this global treaty.
Highlights of this.
Pardon?
Highlights of the act.
The objective of the act is to protect the public from the harmful effects of tobacco, to protect the economy, to protect children, and so to also protect non-tobacco users, because people who smoke emit smoke that affects people around them. And people who are under 18 are the target of tobacco industry. They don't target adults to market the product to them. They target children, and then they are assured of a lifelong customer. So it is really a problem of children. In Kenya also we grow tobacco, so we have to address, when we are doing tobacco control, we have to address the farmers who are growing tobacco and also address the content and emissions of tobacco products. They have to declare, manufacturers have to declare the content and emission. So the Act provides for powers to the Minister for Health to lead tobacco control policies. It also establishes a tobacco control board, which is a multi-sectoral board that advises the Minister of Health on which way to go, and it's made up of people from government, civil society, academia, and these people are experts in their individual areas, so given the complexity of the matter. And then also it establishes a tobacco control fund, which tobacco manufacturers and importers have to put some amount of money called Solosham Fund contribution, which is then to meet the externalities of tobacco production and consumption, which mainly are non-communicable diseases and also some other social and economic issues. It also provides for requirements for tobacco manufacturers and importers to declare the content of their product and the effects of those content and the emissions, and also how it harms the human being. They are required by law to do that. A long time they used to say tobacco smoking is harmful to your health, Ministry of Health advice. But now they own up because it is their product. So the tobacco industry says this product, when consumed, is addictive, causes cancer, causes heart disease, causes impotence, harms your unborn baby, because it is their product and they know the content and they know the harm of the content. So they own up the message themselves. It also requires the Ministry of Finance to increase tax regularly, which is an effective measure for tobacco control to deter people from buying because it's expensive, and also to motivate people who are using to reduce consumption and eventually quit because it is expensive. And it requires also that the Kenya Revenue Authority ensures that all products manufactured in Kenya or imported into the country have a legal measure that you can determine the origin and destination. This is to address illicit trade. And so any product manufactured in Kenya will say manufactured in Kenya to be sold in a destination country X.
Right.
If it is manufactured there and imported here, it is manufactured in that country X for sale only in Kenya.
So that you know.
So that you know. Those are some of the cross-border issues. It also prohibits, the Act also prohibits completely any form of advertising, promotion and sponsorship of tobacco products and sponsorship by tobacco industry. So it is prohibited by law to advertise tobacco products, either on print media, electronic media, or any other platform, including social media. You cannot deliver tobacco products by mail that you can post to someone because the law requires that before you buy a tobacco product, you must prove your age and pay for it. So by delivery, a child can buy. So this law prohibits the sale and delivery to the sale by young people who are under 18, and also the purchase by people who are under 18.
So it can only be purchased by an individual at a shop.
At a shop.
It cannot even be done via e-commerce.
No. And also, even at the point of sale, you have to pay first before it is given to you. And because it is prohibited to advertise and promote, then they are put in a place where it is not displayed.
It is not publicly displayed.
Yes, as an advertisement. So you have to go to the counter, give your ID,
Ask for a packet of tobacco.
a packet of tobacco, and you pay before you can handle. There's no self-service display, and there is prohibited also sale by automated machines like vending machines.
You know, there's something that I keep wondering about. Do we know of any tobacco company that has gone bankrupt, shut because
all these tight regulations?
all these things that we're saying around the world? That how many tobacco companies do you know that have closed down?
So what is happening is tobacco, so globally prevalence is declining, but because of population growth. So say you take Kenya, prevalence dropped from about 23%. It's now currently about 15% among adults.
Since 2007.
Between 2003 and 2014. But when you look at the absolute numbers, the difference in terms of the decline is about 50,000 smokers. And that's because of population growth. So when you take percentages, 10% of 100 is 10. 10% of 110, it will still be 10%, but the absolute number is different. So because populations are growing, and particularly in Africa, and so they are really targeting markets where there's high population growth, Africa being one of them, even as the government is being successful. So as I'm saying, prevalence did drop, which shows that what the Ministry of Health is doing is working because the population is growing and also our incomes are growing. And so when Dorcas talked about taxes, for example, you have to take into account inflation and GDP growth. And so there's more Kenyans who've got more spending or purchasing power, and therefore then they're also being marketed to. And so back to City's question, they have not yet gone bankrupt because of that. But there's also a second thing that they're doing, which is switching their products. And so some of the things that we are seeing is that as we increasingly stigmatize cigarettes, they move into other forms of products. And so in Kenya particularly, you've got nicotine pouches. There's brands like Velo and Lift, and these are really marketing to young people, and then flavored products. And so when you've got nicotine flavored with strawberry, you can of course tell who the target for that is. That's not City they're looking at. That's my 12, 13-year-old. Strawberry is not a flavor for City, I hope.
He likes strawberries.
Wait a moment. Is it a plant?
The strawberry.
No. The strawberry, the flavor.
The flavor, it can be a chemical-based, a synthetic flavor. It doesn't have to be from...
I mean, there are flavors like bubble gum, mint, peach. So, of course, also some of that is targeting women. But
and
that's
they make them also like gadgets that attract women, like lipstick, the way it's packaged.
You know, I asked the question, huh?
Yeah.
Something that kills. It's been demonstrated, it's proved. Class lawsuits in places like the US mostly, even the government of the US, there's occasion when they've actually sued tobacco companies, what they call big tobacco, okay? But I haven't read anywhere where something this dangerous has actually been banned, meaning absolute ban, stop, no production, because it is killing people. Usually when something is this dangerous, people put a halt to it. This one, and then when people talk of smoking, you talk China. No, China. China comes last, and yet with their population, the biggest manufacturers of tobacco are actually in China. China, the numbers are many and people smoke. Okay? Now, what am I saying? All these efforts, and I look around the globe, it seems to be a growth industry. It's not diminishing, and yet it kills people. Isn't this a bit of
what is happening, if, for example, you check what they're calling tobacco-free generations, and particularly in places like New Zealand, they are trying to restrict sales to people, say, who've been born after a certain time. So if you say your cutoff point is people who are born after 2004 should not be exposed to tobacco products, what you're trying to do is to have a generation that grows up having never seen a tobacco advert. When Dorcas talked about products not being shown in public, so they've never seen a cigarette, and then there's no marketing. So that's one way of trying to reduce. And actually, when you bring your smoking prevalence to about 5%, because I want to talk about prohibition. If you remember from alcohol in the US when they tried to ban alcohol.
How did that work?
It didn't work because of addiction. And so with cigarettes, you've got this. In Kenya, there are currently 1.8 million people who are adult tobacco users and who are addicted. So if you ban the substance substance that they're addicted to, you create this immense black market. And so what you're trying to do is to gradually bring your prevalence down to about 4 or 5% of your population. Before then you can ban it. And so the measures that Dorcas talked about, so for example, taxation, because what bothers us about tobacco is the death and disease. And so out of those 1.8 million smokers in Kenya, a third to half are going to die from the product because it's the only legally manufactured product that kills 50% of its users.
Wow.
And so if your Dorcas seated here and you're looking at 1.8 million smokers, out of which half of those, 900,000, are going to die. And before they die slowly. So when you get cancer, you don't die pap. You take time to die. So if you're going to take 3 to 5 years to die from cancer, you're going to take 5 to 10 years to die from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or emphysema without being able to breathe. It's costing the government money to try and keep you alive even as you're dying. And the interesting thing is that many smokers, because quitting is really hard, the quitting success rate is about 30%. And so take that 900,000, half of the Kenyan smokers who are going to die, only 30% of the 1.8 million, if they try to quit, will manage successfully to quit because nicotine is really, really addictive. And then add all these economic costs of taking care of them once they fall sick. That's a burden that the Ministry of Health is trying to bring down. And so while you're doing all of these measures and they work together, so you're trying to stop those who've not yet started, please don't start because you won't be able to stop. Then you're trying to deal with those who are smoking to reduce. Because even as you start reducing consumption, the health effects start reducing. And so for you who said that you started off as a 3-packet smoker, as we raise the taxes, maybe you drop down to 2 packets. It becomes even more expensive. You drop down to 1 packet. And then eventually we get you to drop until you stop.
Is taxation actually leading to that?
Yes.
Is taxation, increasing tax, is it leading to dissuading people from smoking, the smokers from smoking?
Is it a deterrent?
Or is it actually encouraging that black market we're talking about?
Actually, the FCTC, which is the WHO Framework Convention, is a scientifically based protocol, and it has been proven to be effective. Like a 10% rise in tobacco tax in a developing country can lead to reduction in consumption by about 4%. So it is effective, but you don't only apply tax. You increase tax effectively so that somebody can feel the pain. As Rachel said, you have to take into consideration inflation and GDP, but you also educate the public. You also make it difficult to buy, make it difficult to use. So all these things together motivates the person to quit smoking. They start calculating the amount of money they have to spend on buying tobacco products, the trouble they have to go to. Somebody said you have to wake up at 3 a.m. to go and look for a cigarette or to go and look for a place where you can smoke when people are asleep so that you're not arrested. So all these things together help people, deter people from starting. And when children don't access these things, they don't try, they don't have the chance to
initiate smoking,
to experiment. And by experimenting on nicotine, it's a very highly addictive substance that experimenting on it triggers your mind, your brain, a child's brain, and it will never forget. So
go ahead, sorry.
So a child who experiments on tobacco products, nicotine products, remembers, and the next time they try, they even remember more. And the likelihood of these children ending up being smokers is very high. The same for children who have parents who use tobacco products. They will sneak in and try them, but eventually they become users themselves.
So are we looking at the motivation behind this as the detriment that it causes to health, then to be able to curtail some of these excesses, essentially? And we're saying that it is because of the harmful effect on health that we are saying, look, we need to watch out. And as I asked that question, I realized that this has been something that has been running for a very long time. We're talking about decades. We saw the ads, billboards all over the place, harmful to your health. We've seen that there was a legislation that insisted, for example, on a packet of cigarettes that you had to say what the health warning was. Will this now particular piece of standard or requirement then, in your view, make it more grounded? Will it establish it more, that it will sink in the minds of people that this stuff is actually harmful to your health?
Besides creating awareness among the population, it also makes it difficult to buy. It just makes it not a necessity anymore. Even when you have disposable income, it is so expensive, and you know the cost of the effect, that you choose not to buy. And adults don't start smoking. It's usually children or young people, for that matter. So by the time you are being able to buy, and we say the law does not allow sale of cigarettes, for example, by one stick. So you have to buy a packet. And the cost of a packet,
that's the law in Kenya.
Yes. And the cost of a packet at the moment, minimum is 250. I think 250, 270. How many children have to raise their pocket money together to buy one packet?
Actually, you know, I'm laughing. The law may be there. A cigarette is sold.
In sticks.
Yes. It's yes.
So it's about enforcement here.
Yes, it's a question of enforcement, and also those who sell will tell you make more money if you sell it in
single
Kamoja.
stick.
Yes,
Yeah,
then
I
we'll-
think generally, Kenya, we have enforced the tobacco control regulations generally well. We have challenges, for example, even implementing that sale by one stick. And I think when we make it so expensive and also require everybody to be tracked who is selling tobacco, and we collect more data about it, I think people will also not sell, because in kiosks, these are small shops in Kenya, where you sell tobacco products, you're not allowed to allow a child to sell.
to be the person behind the counter.
Yes, to be the person behind the counter. So when we enforce such legislations, most of the shops will stop, retailers in the village, for example, because a child will always be helping the parents to sell. And if they do enforcement on the ground at the county level and the community level, these things will stop. We are strengthening tobacco control in Kenya, and honestly, I cannot deny that we have gaps. But we are strengthening, we are building capacity for enforcement officers. We are also trying to mobilize resources to support them to develop an enforcement strategy. We have undertaken with the Tobacco Control Board an RRI, Rapid Response Initiative, to determine what are the challenges in enforcement that we face. And we are trying to put in place measures to
Is tobacco
improve
growing
that.
profitable?
No.
No.
So what happens?
Tobacco growing is not profitable.
It's not profitable. So the research that we have shows that most tobacco farmers make losses, and some of the losses, particularly in places like Bungoma, go to negative 37,000 Kenya shillings per planting season. Now, why the farmer thinks that he's making money is that because of the value chain that the tobacco industry had developed, so they provide inputs, so they give fertilizer, they give the seeds, they give the pesticides on credit, and then there's a contract that the farmer has signed with the industry, and you have contracted by a particular tobacco company. So in Kenya, you've got BAT, you've got Mastermind. At one point, we had Alliance One. So you're contracted to one, and you can't sell to anybody else. So of course, that creates an unequal bargaining relationship, because then when it's time to deliver your produce, you can only deliver to the person who's contracted you. And then they subtract from the price the cost of the inputs. So if at that point, and they also decide the grade, so you bring your leaf and the guy tells you, oh, this one is grade 3, that costs less than grade 1. And you can't negotiate or bargain, and you can't sell to anybody else. So then they deduct the cost of their inputs from your profit. And of course, if then the cost of input was more, you're in debt to them, so you have to contract for the next planting season. But actually, the biggest factor that causes these losses is that farmers don't calculate the cost of labor. And tobacco growing is highly labor intensive. It's not, you pick by hand, you don't pick by machine. And so all the tasks that go into planting, so you've got planting, you've got weeding, you've got watering, then you've got applying the chemicals, and then you've got harvesting. It takes a farmer, his wife, and his children. And so if you go to Bungoma, you go to Busia, you go to Migori, you go to Meru, which are the tobacco growing countries, it was found that actually children in those areas are missing school because they are being roped into the farm. And of course, you don't pay your children a salary. So if you hired a casual laborer and had to pay him to do all those tasks that your wife and children are subsidizing for you, then you'd realize that what you think is a profit is not actually a profit. And the minute you send your kids to school and have to hire labor and calculate in your labor cost, that's how we are getting that negative 37,000 Kenya shillings. And actually, before the Ministry of Health started an alternative cropping project, which I'll ask Dorcas to talk about, when you went to Malakisi, the side of the road that grows maize and the side of the road that grows tobacco, you could just see the difference. One side, ile ya mahindi, iron sheet roof. Ile ya tobacco, grass thatched roof. And you know, in Kenya, when we're doing the national surveys, we just ask people about their housing because the kind of house somebody can afford tells you a lot about the disposable income. And so growing tobacco is not profitable. And the only reason that they grow it is because of that guaranteed chain that all the way from inputs to where to take my produce, there's someone who's going to buy it. But in terms of
the
profits,
headache has been taken. So from an economist point of view, it's not making sense.
No.
But practically, this person is seeing there is money and I am able to
And they also
afford
have a
my livelihood. I want us to take a
perpetual
break. And
contract.
But let me ask this question.
let's take a break.
Yeah.
Let's take a break.
Yes.
It's 26 minutes to 10, Kenya's biggest conversation. We're talking about Tobacco Control Act and how we can promote development and implementation of tobacco control policies in Kenya. What's the best way to do it? We're joined by Dorcas Kiptui. Dorcas Kiptui is the head of the Division of Tobacco Control in the Department of Non-Communicable Diseases at the Ministry of Health. And Rachel Kitonyo-Devotsu is the Senior Tobacco Control Advisor at the Tobacco Control Data Initiative Program of the Development Gateway Organization. Time for that break. We'll be back shortly. Have you watched, Dorcas?
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
Conversation this time is about promoting development and implementation of tobacco control policies in Kenya through online platforms. We have Dorcas Kiptui, Head of Division of Tobacco Control at the Ministry of Health, and Rachel Kitonyo-Devotsu, who's the Senior Tobacco Control Advisor at the Tobacco Control Data Initiative Program, Development Gateway. You'll tell us, Rachel, shortly about the online platform that you have that creates this awareness. But as we do that, there are several questions and debates that are emerging even online. First of all, you talked about so tobacco control, the harmful effects of tobacco, and Dorcas, you told us about this and why we came up with the Tobacco Control Act. And then Dorcas, you told us as well about implementation of this and enforcement of the Tobacco Control Act. We went into what's happening, and now there's a shift and introduction of other products that are not cigarettes. So they are not sold in packs. They don't have to be, to have that labeling. They are now targeting and they are reaching younger audiences, and they contain nicotine. And the question is, what is the harmful ingredient in a cigarette? Is nicotine harmful?
Yes, nicotine is an addictive substance, and it is the main ingredient that tobacco industry sells to addict people so that they are dependent on tobacco products and they can continue buying from them and they make a huge profit. But besides that, for example, there are other constituents and emissions from tobacco products. For example, cigarettes have more than 7,000 chemicals in them. And
Wait. Cigarettes have or tobacco has?
okay, the tobacco plant will absorb all the fertilizer, all the pesticides used. And then this product is cured with smoke in Kenya mostly, and then it is bought by the tobacco industry where they manufacture it, they shred it and add more things. One, they add them to contain the moisture so that the cigarette is not dry, for example, or they add something else like ammonia to enhance nicotine absorption and therefore higher addiction and quicker addiction and quicker delivery of nicotine.
So the harmful effect of nicotine is in the addiction.
Is the addiction, and it is the main ingredient that is sold in tobacco products. But
Okay.
So the
it comes alongside all these other chemicals.
Okay.
Besides that, when a smoker smokes, when they inhale, when they burn it, when they light the cigarette, the chemicals react also and create more. And when they inhale and exhale, they still have those chemicals that other people around the smoker.
What brings this physiological harm to the body? What you talked about, the impotence, the lung diseases, the cancer causing. What is it?
One, it is because of the effects of nicotine, for example, and the effects of the content of tobacco products. Some of them are carcinogens. Some of them are toxins, cancer-causing agents. Some are toxins, means they are poison. They are poisonous, or they also are harmful. They destroy cells and they destroy tissue. So, for example, when somebody smokes, it immediately causes constriction, how do you call it? Narrowing of blood vessels, and therefore your heart beats very fast. Your blood pressure goes up trying to pump the blood through the valves. Eventually, it also causes deposit of fats in your blood vessels, and eventually you have blocked blood vessels. That's why you see people who have smoked for a long time, they have amputated feet and arms, body parts. Secondly, the toxins or the poison and the harmful ingredients affect your cells, affect your organs, affect your systems together, because the heart pumps the content of the blood into the lungs and into the rest of the body. All these chemicals goes around the body of a human when they are consuming tobacco products, and so they injure the cells, they cause distortion of cells. And when you're having a pregnancy, you can also have malformations because of distortion of the growth of the baby.
Dorcas, is there a difference between somebody who is puffing a cigarette stick and somebody who is inhaling or using a nicotine pouch?
Okay, all tobacco products are harmful used in any form, including the smoke or emissions from those products, because they are irritants, they are harmful products, they are cancer-causing agents, they are all in there. So there is no safer product than another. You cannot say, for example, an analogy,
vapes,
that when you go to the road, would you rather be hit by a motorbike, a car, or a lorry? That is really what I'm thinking that to be.
Bicycle.
Well, somebody might say if you're hit by a motorcycle, it wouldn't kill you, a lorry would. You see that
No,
they're making
it depends on how it
comparison.
hits you, one,
Sure,
and
it
secondly,
depends on how
it will injure you.
Okay.
You will not be whole after that.
Sure.
Yes, and it can a bicycle, for example, you
Yeah.
can fall off a bike and crack your
Crack your
head.
skull and you're gone.
Yes.
That's true.
So there is no, from a health perspective,
Yeah.
and also from the economic and environmental, the whole process of growing, production and sale and consumption has effects on different aspects of society.
Absolutely.
I just
Can
want
we-
to add something. So particularly from a youth and children perspective, the emerging science is that the human brain is not fully developed until about age 25. I don't know if you're aware that now even in the US, when sentencing a young person, they take that into account.
Yes.
So of course you turn 18, you get an ID, but the brain is still that of a
You're a
child.
child, yeah.
And so nicotine affects developing brains. And so if the target of the nicotine pouches is not smokers, but is non-smokers. And so even when we talk about the whole harm reduction, and the industry is coming and saying that the nicotine pouch is less harmful. So they are not saying it is not harmful. They're saying it's less harmful. So going back to Dorcas' analogy, if you jump from the 20th floor, you'll die. If you jump from the 5th floor, you're still not safe, right?
Sure.
You break your legs.
Or die.
Or die, depending. And so they are trying to say, so let's not jump from the 20th floor, let's jump from the 5th floor. Would you take your 2-month-old baby and drop it from the 5th floor?
Okay.
So from that perspective, and so going back to Eric's question, in cigarettes, the tar that comes from the smoked product is what, for example, irritates the lungs and causes lung cancer. And then all those other chemicals that she talked about, some of which are added by the tobacco industry and some of which come by combustion. So yes, the nicotine pouch, because it doesn't have combustion, perhaps doesn't have tar, but the liquid in which the nicotine is put still has other carcinogens. And those are the ones that still irritate. And so, for example, some of the emerging science on the risk of cancer is that the nicotine pouches, and not just nicotine pouches, even e-cigarettes, because remember, e-cigarettes, you still have to inhale. So if you're inhaling something that goes to the lungs, what the lungs wants is oxygen.
Sure.
It doesn't want liquids that come with other chemicals. So those still irritate the lungs and still cause problems. And even now there's research ongoing into, for example, in the mouth, because when you put the nicotine pouch, it sits there as you absorb the nicotine. So there are still other chemicals. So they're not really giving you pure nicotine. It's nicotine dissolved or mixed with something else. And all those chemicals are still carcinogenic.
So plainly, nicotine is harmful.
Yes.
To
Is
young
that what-
people up to age 25, it affects brain development.
Okay.
These are kids in school. These are kids in university. They need their brains.
Okay.
Unless we want a brainless society, for that age group, nicotine is harmful to the brain.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
clear. One of the things that we're talking about today is on digital platforms, which is where a lot of the audience is paying attention to today. In the 80s, I'm made to understand, and then in the 90s, which I know a little bit about, the advertisements were visual, really visual in terms of campaigns. We saw the darkened lungs, and we saw people who were emaciated as a result of being on the smoke, right? Are we saying now that the digital number one, did those visuals in terms of awareness campaigns, did they work to get folks off the smoke? 1. 2, what tools then in the world that we are today, obviously from this platform, are we seeing that is going to help to propel this conversation to stick hard and fast in the minds of those who smoke or who don't, who are in the community?
So if you go back to the science of advertising, why do companies advertise? Because advertising works. It helps to create brand recognition and brand loyalty, yeah? And that's why they invest millions in advertising. And that's why when you try to ban advertising, you're fought. So it works the other way, even from a health promotion perspective, that the more we repeat the message, the more people remember it.
Yeah.
And so tobacco advertising and promotion, when banned, stops the industry from reaching its customers, and when we use it for public health, it also works. And so mass media campaigns is one of the strategies for tobacco control. And if you look, there's a survey that was done in Kenya called the International Tobacco Control Policy Evaluation Project in 2018. They showed that when, for example, we put the first graphic health warnings in Kenya came in around 2015, 2016, because our regulations that were passed in 2014. And so this survey done in 2018 actually asked smokers, and they had seen the health warnings, and it had an impact. And actually in Kenya, public awareness about the harms of smoking is really high. And so we've got about, among non-smokers, public awareness is probably at 90%. Among smokers, it's about 84% from this survey. And this was a sample of about 2,000, which is representative for Kenya. So there's really high awareness, and these health warnings have helped. It would have been even more effective if we'd accompanied by hard-hitting television and radio adverts. I know the Ministry of Health did a 6-week campaign, but for it to really have that sustained impact, going back to industry adverts, so you see Coca-Cola adverts every day. They're trying to reinforce to you that when you're hungry, you take Coca-Cola. When you're thirsty, we would, if we had the money, would need to do that. But they are effective as a strategy. They work.
Yeah.
And I think also, in addition to advertising, they recruit new people. If you remember adverts that were there before, it showed that, I remember one, Smooth All the Way, somebody seated beside, I think it was a Ferrari, and a woman in a red, beautiful dress. So for you, a young man, you want to attract such a woman, which was perceived to be the woman. You want to be classy by having a cigarette with you or an alcoholic drink with you
and
or something.
Ferrari.
Yes. So, ama sigara ya marafiki. That was a very misleading. Marafiki, really, your friend wants to kill you. They share with you something that will kill
But
you.
they were powerful adverts also.
Yeah, so those were powerful. I remember them. I was not very grown up then, but I remember them. So by advertising and even having it in movies and films in a positive way, I believe what you referred to earlier demonstrates the causes of consumption of substances. But if it is being advertised in a positive way, it influences young people, it influences the society to be even some role models. That is why the Act bans even advertising by endorsement and testimonials by role models in the society.
I just want to go
So,
to those.
just a minute. So, the graphic health warnings in the tobacco control products do not only contain text but also graphic, because there are many people who smoke who are very poor, low education, so they cannot read, they don't understand the English and Swahili sometimes. So we have put
You see
pictures.
the picture.
The government requires a graphic health warning which shows you. And we did a survey recently, and tobacco users admitted and said these pictures are real. We have
How does it affect them?
some have quit. We have even helped some. We directed some to health centers where they could get help. So it's now ukiona kwa movies, any smoker who is trying to quit, if they see someone smoking on the TV or an advertisement of the tobacco product, they will quickly go and get one.
I want to throw in this question before we wind up.
Sorry, Rachel.
Reading government.uk. This is the government of the UK's website. 1 million smokers. This was posted on the 11th of April, 7 days ago. 1 million smokers will be encouraged to swap cigarettes for vapes under a pioneering new Soap to Stop scheme designed to improve the health of the nation and cut smoking rates. As part of the world first national scheme, almost 1 in 5 of all smokers in England will be provided with a vape starter kit alongside behavioral support to help them quit the habit as part of a series of new measures to help the government meet its ambition of being smoke-free by 2030. That is, by reducing smoking rates to 5% or less. Local authorities will be invited to take part in the scheme later this year. Each will design a scheme which suits its needs. So basically, 1 million smokers in the UK are being given vapes. What does that mean?
So the problem, go back to, is in Kenya, 15% of the adults smoke. 3.15%. By adults, I mean 15 and over. For young people, so let's take 15 and below, by the GYTS, our prevalence rates are 3.2%. So in the UK, they are trying to use vapes to get smokers to stop smoking. In Kenya, when you're marketing Velo, Lift, and other nicotine pouches, you're not marketing them to teenagers who are smoking. You're marketing them to non-smoking teenagers. So you cannot compare Kenya to the UK. And so that's when I go back to my story of the flavoring, the strawberry, the bubble gum. You're marketing to children.
The messaging here is like vaping is not harmful.
It
No,
is.
it is.
It is
severely
harmful.
And the same UK, it was one of the first countries to start marketing and selling vapes, and vapes were blowing up on youth faces.
Yes.
In their lungs were blowing up. So if you see your neighbor doing something bad, you don't say, my neighbor is doing it, so I will do it. If they are beating their wife or killing their children, you don't do the same. And as Rachel has said, the population that is using tobacco products abroad in the UK is so big that they will probably, I'm not speaking for them, do anything to reduce it. But in Kenya, these are tobacco products. Who manufactures them? It's tobacco industry. So I don't think the government of Kenya, being a party to the FCTC and caring for its citizens, will start marketing and selling tobacco products. And we are trying to prevent people from starting so that we don't have to give them
Support in health.
Yes.
In healthcare.
Yeah, and we are getting there, as Rachel has said.
Asante
Thank
sana,
you.
ladies. Dorcas Kiptui is the head of Division of Tobacco Control at the Ministry of Health, and Rachel Kitonyo is from Development Gateway. She is a Senior Tobacco Control Advisor at the Tobacco Control Data Initiative Program. Thank you for tuning in to Kenya's biggest conversation. We'll be back tomorrow. Have a lovely day. It's 10
I have a
a.m.
closing remark.
Uko na closing remark?
Yes, tomorrow we are launching the data platform.
Right.
It's called the Data Dashboard, which was developed Ministry of Health in collaboration with Development Gateway. So tomorrow we are launching it, which will provide access to the public and policymakers on tobacco. So if you have any question tomorrow, we are going to launch it. You will see it and you can visit for further information.
How can one access it, right?
www.kenya.tobaccocontroldata.org.
www.kenya.tobaccocontroldata.org. Okay.